All right, so our next session is an overview of Oklahoma election laws. And we are very pleased to have Misha Mower, the Public Information Officer for the Oklahoma State Election Board, with us today to kind of work through some important laws regulating voting and elections in the state. And when doing this work on college campuses, it is important to build relationships with our local elected officials because they are the first and most trusted information of election information that we have in the state. And based on my conversations with Misha and her colleagues, before this summit, I'm confident that they are here to answer your questions and to be an asset to the work that you're doing. So. Right now I'm going to kick it over to Misha to share her presentation and to give you information about the election laws in the state.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm so glad you could join us today. Just to kind of tell you a little bit about where I am, I do have 6 children. I have a 21-year-old who just got married recently. I have a son who turns 19 this month and will be a sophomore over at OSU. And I have a 17-year-old who will be a senior this year. So I'm kind of navigating these waters of college life all over again. It's like a brand new experience. But we are going to talk about a number of different topics today. And we've got a lot to cover, but I want to get through as many questions as I can and as much information as I can. And we're going to go ahead and kick it off with online voter registration. I know that was a big topic during the last discussion. And so I do want to address that before we get started. And online voter registration, has been available to the election board for several years now. I know people are getting antsy and ready for it to be in place. But it is more important to get things right and to make sure it's safe and secure than to just dive right in and find issues as you go along. One of the requirements of online voter registration is that we do need to interface with DPS in order to bring online voter registration to Oklahoma. DPS has been working very, very hard to update their system and to get Real ID moving, but until that happens and until that is completely rolled out, we're waiting on that to happen before we can go ahead and move forward with online voter registration. We do hope to have it out probably sometime next year. But like I said, right now DPS is slowly starting to roll out that Real ID process. I believe it started in June and it will continue to take place through the end of the year. But let's get started. I am going to start. I have some slides to show you, so we're going to get started with that. Let me get my screen up here real quick. And we're going to start with voting in Oklahoma. First of all, voting, registering to vote is really the first step in this process. And I think sometimes we just really overthink it. It's very, very easy in Oklahoma. To register to vote in Oklahoma, there are multiple ways to do this. You can use our brand new OK Voter Portal Wizard, which we're very excited about. We just launched this here a couple of months ago. You can go online, complete your application online, print it, sign it, and then mail it to your county election board or to us here at the state election board. If you don't have a printer at home, that's okay. You can email it to yourself and print it later when you do have a printer. You can also receive a transition code when you complete it using the wizard. And this allows you to call the county election board and to just verify where your registration is, if it's been processed, or if there are questions that you have regarding that. You can also register to vote at your county election board, and applications are available at most tag agencies, post offices, and libraries. And in fact, you may not realize this, but tag agencies that issue driver's license or state IDs are actually considered official voter registration agencies. So if you go into your local tag agency, complete your application, and hand it to them, they will mail that application in for you at no cost. So let's talk a little bit about who can register. To register in Oklahoma, you must be first and foremost a citizen of the United States. You must be 18 years of age or older on election day, unless of course you're pre-registering. And last year, Oklahoma did pass a law that does allow 17-and-a-half-year-olds to pre-register. So that way you never miss an election. You also need to be a resident of the state of Oklahoma. No documentation is required to register. You do, however, have to have your Oklahoma driver's license number or the last 4 digits of your social security number. And you will be asked to sign an oath stating that all information you've provided on your application is true. Now, I do want you to keep in mind that just because you've filled that application out, your voter registration must be approved by the County Election Board Secretary before you can vote. So once your application has been processed, you will either receive a voter ID card in the mail, which tells you that you are a registered voter. If your registration or your application has been rejected for some reason, you will receive a letter from your county election board letting you know exactly why, and you can simply fill that application out again and provide the appropriate information. Now, there are a lot of questions that come up with this process. As easy as it is, there's always something, that maybe you just, weren't quite exactly sure about. And we're going to kind of cover some of those frequently asked questions, especially those questions that come from new voters, young voters who've done this and this is their first time. What address do I use? I saw this come up in the chat here just a few minutes ago. You should use your legal address. This is the address that is actually used to assign you to your various voting districts. Now, this could be different for everyone. If you are still considered a dependent and your parents consider you a dependent on their taxes, it could be your home address. If you've moved out of the house and into an apartment, it could be your apartment address near the campus. It could be your dorm room. If you've moved in with your grandparents near the campus, it could be that address. Again, this is going to vary from person to person. What address you use is entirely up to you. Do I have to choose a party? No, you do not have to choose a party. If you do not choose one, you will be considered an independent. And in Oklahoma, independent simply means that you do not affiliate with any particular party. So what is the advantage to choosing a party? Oklahoma is actually considered a closed primary state. Basically what that means is if you're a Republican, you vote in the Republican primaries. If you're a Democrat, you vote in the Democratic primaries. If you affiliate with a party, you will be allowed to vote in that party's primary. There is a little provision in the law, however, that does allow all of our recognized parties to open their primaries to independents. And currently, independents are allowed to vote in Democratic primaries for the 2020 and 2021 election years. If you are an independent, when you go into those primaries, you simply let the poll worker know that you're an independent, but you would like to receive the Democratic primary ballot, and they will give that ballot to you. The same goes if you request an absentee ballot. You can request that you would like to receive the Democratic Party primary ballot if you're an independent. Some of our more frequently asked questions are, what parties are recognized in Oklahoma? We actually have 3: Democrat, Republican, and Libertarian. So how can I vote if I'm away at school? This is a great question that comes up all the time. And fortunately for you, there are lots of options. You can apply for absentee ballots. And what's great about absentee ballots, here in Oklahoma, you can apply for a single election, or you can apply for absentee ballots for a full election year. And if you get those absentee ballots, you won't miss an election because they will automatically come to you. The other great thing about absentee ballots is those ballots are automatically mailed to you. However, if you decide at some point that, maybe you would like to just go in and cast your ballot in person for that first presidential election, or maybe you happen to be in town to cast your ballot, you can always do that. You would simply show up at your polling place on election day or during early voting, let them know that you did receive an absentee ballot, but you've decided that you would like to vote in person. And all you have to do is sign an affidavit stating that you have not already voted that absentee ballot, and they will assign you a brand new ballot to vote in person. So you can still do that even if you've applied for those absentees. Another option for college students is you can vote early. This is a great option because no excuse or pre-registration is needed, and early voting is available before every single election at your county election board. So whether you have a small school board election or you have a big state or federal election, we always offer early voting. Do I need to show my ID every time I vote? This is a question that comes up, particularly if you have moved from a different state, because ID laws do vary from state to state. But yes, Oklahoma does require proof of identity at the polls. ID verification is also needed if you're voting by absentee ballot. So what types of identity can you use? Oklahoma has 3 different types of proof of identity which can be used. You can use a photo ID that's issued by the United States government, the state of Oklahoma, or a federally recognized tribal government. So what those could include might be an Oklahoma driver's license. If you're in the military and have a military ID, that would work. A passport would work. There are a number of different forms of ID that would work. The ID must have an expiration date that is after the date of the election, unless that ID is valid indefinitely. So do be sure that if you're using your driver's license or any other type of ID, that it is in date. We get this question a lot too. What about student IDs? These are perfectly acceptable, provided it is a photo ID and it is issued by a state-funded college or university, and of course it does have a valid expiration date. You can also use that free voter ID card that I told you about earlier. These are mailed to you by your county election board when you get registered to vote. If you've been registered, and I know college students move around a lot and it's easy to misplace things like that. If you have misplaced it and you don't remember where you put it, just give your county election board a call. You can even give us a call here at the state and we can get a new one sent to you. Another way to vote is by provisional ballot with a signed affidavit. Let's say you get to the polls and you realize you've left your ID at home. Maybe you just don't want to show your ID. You can always vote with that provisional ballot. This also is a great way to vote if you get to the polls and maybe your name isn't in the poll book or there's some other type of an issue. You always have that option of voting that provisional ballot with a signed affidavit. Do keep in mind, though, that in order for that provisional ballot to count, you do have to be a registered voter and you do have to be voting in at the precinct which you are assigned to. So do keep that in mind if you choose to vote by provisional ballot. When can I vote? Of course, you can vote on election day. Our polls are open 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And like I said, in Oklahoma, you must vote at your assigned polling place for your vote to count. So in other words, just because all of your friends are going to one polling place doesn't mean that you can necessarily vote there and make your vote count. You do need to vote where you are assigned because those ballots do vary from location to location. Provisional ballots are verified and counted after Election Day, but before those results are certified. I know that comes up quite often. Some people think that those provisional ballots are not counted, unless the election is close, and that's simply not the case. Those are verified and counted after Election Day, and they will be included with those certified results. Another way to vote is early voting. If you've never voted early before, this is fantastic, especially if you have a busy day on election day, or you're just simply not sure you're going to make it to the polls on time. The Thursday and Friday before each election is open for early voting. It's from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's at your county election board, not your polling place, but it is available at your county election board. And it is extended to include Saturday from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. for all state and federal elections. So again, early voting available for every election at your county election board. And when we get to those state and federal elections, we have early voting on Saturday. So if you say go to school in Norman, but maybe you live in Oklahoma City, you can come home and vote at your county election board. And that's another great way to vote in person. As far as absentee voting is considered, you can actually request absentee ballots online, and this is fantastic. I've done this numerous times. You can request absentee ballots while you're walking to class. It is that easy. It takes probably 30 seconds to do. Those ballots are mailed approximately 1 month prior to the election, and you can track your ballots online as well using our OK Voter portal. You can actually see when your ballot was sent, when the county election board receives it, and whether or not it was counted. Now, just remember, your ballots do need to be notarized, and you should never, ever be charged a fee for notarization. That is the law. If you choose to have your ballot notarized, the notary must do it at no cost. Now, with the August 25th election coming up, there are new absentee verification options. You can choose to have it notarized, or for this particular election, since there is a COVID-19 state of emergency in place, you can choose to submit a copy of your photo ID in lieu of that notarized signature. Now, keep in mind that this is only available for 2020 elections, and it's only available if the governor has issued a COVID-19 state of emergency 45 days prior to the election, or if one is issued during that 45 days leading up to that election. And I know sometimes if you haven't voted by absentee before, you know, it can seem a little intimidating. It's actually very, very easy. Instructions are included with your ballot. And we also do have instructions online at elections.ok.gov. So if you want to take a look at those, you take a look at them before you actually receive your ballot. You can find free absentee voter services on our website at elections.ok.gov. You can click, these are organized by county, so you can actually click on your county and locate a bank or a credit union near you that will either make a copy of your ID for you or notarize your ballot at no cost. We also have numerous library locations around the state, as well as other businesses who have stepped up to the plate to offer these free absentee voter services. So how safe is absentee voting? I know this has been in the news a lot, you know, both nationally and here locally. Only the voter in Oklahoma may request an absentee ballot. So no one can request an absentee ballot on your behalf here in Oklahoma. Absentee ballots do have to be verified, and we do this from the front end. There are a lot of states that do this on the back end. Oklahoma requires that they must be notarized, or if the COVID-19 state of emergency is in place, you can, of course, include a copy of your ID in lieu of that notarization. And this is to ensure that the person who has issued that ballot voted that ballot and returned that ballot. Absentee ballots are actually verified during a public meeting by a bipartisan election board. This is probably something many of you didn't know. Once those absentee ballots are received, the county election boards will hold a public meeting, and that bipartisan election board goes through each and every single one of those ballots to verify that they have been correctly notarized and that the notarization matches the signature. They will go through to make sure that the copy of the ID is attached and that it matches the signature. So all of this is actually done in a public meeting. And once those ballots have been verified, they are secured by the sheriff and locked up until election day when those votes are actually tabulated. So there is a very specific procedure in place for processing these. We're going to talk a little bit while we're on security about election and ballot security. There are three main threats to our election security. Cybersecurity, which of course we hear about all the time, physical security, and also probably one of our biggest threats is misinformation and disinformation. And I'm going to tell you why. With cybersecurity, we work with multiple agencies, including the U.S. and State Department of Homeland Security, State Cyber Command, the FBI, a whole list of others. Our cybersecurity process is actually very intricate. We have so much more than I could possibly cover in one short session. But basically, our voting devices, our voting system software, computers, both used to program those devices and those used to tabulate results, are never connected to the internet. We do have a uniform election system. So in other words, the various system components and applications are contained within their own silo. So if there is a breach, if there is an incident that occurs, we can isolate that incident and it doesn't spread to other systems. We also have an anti-tampering digital signature that is required at each and every step of the election process. And this is from the county level on up to the state level. If it's not verified, that system will fail to work. So that's another security feature we have in place. As far as our physical security is concerned, we do work with the State Department of Homeland Security to conduct physical audits of our county election boards and voting areas. We do have a very, very strict chain of custody of both the voting devices and the ballots. And like I said, there is a very specific procedure that takes place. It is a very complex procedure, and each and every step must be followed. Our voting devices, or our e-scans as we call them, are actually assigned to each precinct. So in other words, an e-scan or a voting device could not be transported to another precinct. It wouldn't work. It actually has to be used in the precinct where it is assigned. We have encrypted keys that we use to write the mobile ballot box, and that's what is used to tally the votes. We have two-factor authentication, and each and every one of those voting devices has a numbered seal that's placed on the locked door where that MBB is actually kept. And that seal is checked by the inspector at the polling place, and it's checked again when the voting device is actually returned to the county election board. Misinformation and disinformation. I'm going to take just a second on this because this is, cybersecurity, physical security are both huge concerns for us. But quite honestly, misinformation and disinformation is one of the biggest threats we have to our system. It takes a matter of seconds for bad information to be transmitted online. I think, as soon as you post something, within a matter of seconds, it could be halfway around the world. We are actually part of a national effort to promote trusted information. You may have seen on Twitter the hashtag TrustedInfo2020. That was actually started by the National Association of Secretaries of State. It's also endorsed by the National Association of State Election Directors, which we are a member of. And it's an effort to let Americans know that their first and trusted sources of information should always be their local, county, and state election officials. Do not rely on social media for information. If you have questions about our voting system, please contact your state and local county election officials. And also keep in mind that states vary dramatically, laws vary. If you see something happening in another state, don't always assume that that's the case here in Oklahoma, because like I said, that the systems do vary dramatically. Voting laws are very, very different, and you should always talk to your state and county officials if you have any questions whatsoever. That's what we're here for. Voting, I do want to end, is your responsibility. I know we've had questions about, how do I make sure that my information isn't dropped from the system? It is your responsibility to maintain your registration. Just like every other right we have, it comes with a certain amount of responsibility. You do need to keep your information up to date. So if you move, make sure you update your information and vote. Always vote when you have an opportunity. The easiest way to do this is by using our OK Voter portal. You can use our OK Voter portal to verify your voting register or your voter registration information. You can use it to view your voting districts. I know there was a question that popped up in chat about, how do we know, where we vote? How do we know this information? You can go onto the voter portal and it will have all of your voting districts as well as your representatives and those who are representing your particular district. You can also find your polling place information. And I always recommend that you check this, particularly in this time period with COVID-19. Things are changing rapidly. We never know when a polling place might need to be changed because of an emergency. So we always do recommend that you check your polling place before you go vote. You can also get onto the voter portal and view a sample ballot. This is great because it is, when you type in your name and your birth date, it will pull up the sample ballot that is specific to you and your precinct. You can also check the status of your absentee ballots, which I talked about a little bit earlier. You can check to see when it was sent, when it was received by your county election board, and whether or not it was counted. And here is the address. If you go to elections.ok.gov/OVP, you will be able to get on that voter portal and do a number of things. One other thing I do want to mention is that if you are making a move within the county, let's say you're just simply moving from one address to another address in Cleveland County, you can actually do that update online. You can change your address online. If you need to, say, change your party affiliation, you can do that online as well. So those are just some of the things that you can currently do online. If you need more information, always give us a call. Here's our information. Our website is elections.ok.gov. We also have a Twitter account and Facebook page. You can email us, you can give us a call, or you can call your county election officials if you have any questions whatsoever. And I know there were some questions that came up a little bit earlier. Like I said, I saw in the chat. You should never feel like it's too complex. Even as election officials, we're always learning. I think you heard that from the representatives too. It's such a learning process, and you should never feel like in order to vote, you need to know everything. All of this is a learning process, and no question is too ridiculous or too silly. We're all learning as we go, and so please feel free to reach out to us at any time whatsoever. Thank you, and I appreciate it.
All right, so the chat has been going crazy with everything. Misha, if you could stop.
Yes, I am trying to, okay.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Bottom. He's been going crazy with everything.
Okay.
Chat, so I've been trying, we've answered some, you answered some while you were presenting, but there's a couple here that I think if we could get on record would be
Perfect.
awesome. So let me see. There we go. Okay, so first question, has there been any consideration for extending early voting, for example, an entire week before the election to help reduce the crowds that are more typical for the November election?
Okay, and that's a great question. I'm going to kind of answer this in a couple of different ways. First of all of our voting times and days, that is defined by state statute. So we can't just simply decide that for this particular election, we want to extend it an extra day. All of that is determined by state statute. Another consideration to take that I think I do need to point out, a lot of people don't realize that in Oklahoma, we actually have elections almost every single month in Oklahoma. This year is different. There are some dates that are off limits because this is an even numbered year. But right now, like I said, we have to keep in mind that everything we do in this process is determined by state statute and our state laws. Also, we have elections every year. So when you talk about the number of elections that are happening, when we are just ending an election, you've already cast your ballot and your job is done for that part. But our county election board officials and our state election officials are still processing those are still processing the ballots for the next election. Our military and overseas ballots actually are required by federal law to be sent out 45 days prior to the election. So while everyone thinks that election is over with, we're already thinking about that next election. And sometimes absentee ballots are going out for the next election before one election has finished.
Great, thank you for that clarification. There was a question about voting machines. So if the machines are not connected to the internet, how are the state tabulations conveyed to the county election boards?
That's a virtual private network. So, and like I said, I can't get into that much more because again, that is a security issue.
Sure, understand. Okay, with the alternative absentee, so a copy of the ID that is in place with the COVID-19 kind of parameters, do you still sign the envelope even if there is no notary signature?
Yes, absolutely. You will still fill out the top part of that affidavit envelope, and there are instructions, but you will still complete that part. You will still sign it, and then just make a photo ID of your copy, or I'm sorry, of your ID, and you can attach that with a paper clip, a staple, tape, whatever you have handy. You can attach that to the side of your absentee ballot affidavit.
Okay, and if it's not, just like a follow-up question, if it's not attached, like that form of ID, that photocopy to the affidavit, if it's just placed in the envelope, is that going to cause any holdups with the election board?
That will not cause any issue. The reason we have them placed on the outside is one, it's convenient when you have those voting boards and they're going through tens of thousands, especially our larger counties, Oklahoma, Tulsa, Cleveland County, those are our three largest counties. And when they're going through tens of thousands of absentee ballots, that is the quickest and easiest way to check those and to verify those. But also, what they don't want to have to do is get into that envelope, because if you have accidentally put that in with your ballot, then it's likely that someone may be able to view that ballot. So again, it's for your privacy as well, so that your ballot remains in its secret envelope and that no one can view it.
Right. I know that can get a little confusing with the three different
envelopes. But so to clarify, if you forget, or you don't have a stapler or a tape handy and you just stick it in there anyway, we will double check that and just make sure that you did include that. Our goal is to make sure votes are counted.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've got a question here about voter fraud. So how likely is it that voter fraud occurs? I hear that it is really rare, but a lot of people worry about it, and even our president is talking about this concerns with the presidential election.
Exactly. And again, a lot of times, we hear about what's happening in other states, and you have to realize that not every state has the same security procedures that we do. That is one thing we're extremely proud of here in Oklahoma. We do have, like I said, a very intricate security system in place. And when I talk about security, I'm also talking about the individuals and the organizations that we deal with. We are in contact with these people daily to make sure that all aspects of our system are secure. And that's one reason why we do have this absentee voter verification in place, is to make sure that the person who requested that ballot, who voted that ballot, is the person who is returning that ballot. It is very rare here in Oklahoma. If we receive information and documentation of fraud taking place, that is reported to the county election boards, and they will take that and turn that over to their district attorney to investigate and possibly prosecute if it comes to that.
Okay. Let's see. Can you give examples of what changes in elections are within the administrative power of election officials to change, if any?
Okay. Like I said, everything we do is for the most part determined by our state law. Everything down to our voting times when candidate filing has to take place. That's why we had candidate filing, even though there was a COVID-19 state of emergency in place and people were working from home. The Capitol was shut down. I was one of them. We were actually out on the front lawn of the Capitol taking those candidate filings through a drive-through line because we were required to be here and we were required to offer that in-person option. And that is why we still have in-person options for voting on election day. We have to offer an in-person option. We have to offer early voting, and we do have to offer that absentee process as well.
Awesome. So there's a question here about clarification on the amount of postage that is needed to return an absentee ballot. I know that I have seen a ton of misinformation about this, and I've actually called our county election board and gotten a different answer than what the USPS tells us. So I'd like to hear what is the required amount?
I would love to answer this. It does vary from person to person, depending on the election. Some voters may have one ballot because they're an independent and they weren't eligible to vote in the primary, but they have the state question to vote on, for instance, in the June 30th primary. Some may have 2 or 3 ballots. Some of those ballots vary in size as well. Some of them are very long, some of them are short. So again, that postage varies. I'm going to give you one very, very simple tip to figuring that postage. When you receive that absentee ballot in the mail, look on the outside of that envelope. How much did it cost to get that ballot to you? It's not going to cost any more than that because you have to realize you're taking those papers out and you're discarding the outer envelope as well as other information. So it's not going to cost any more than what it costs to send you.
Well, that's a really good.
Right. And I was going to say, I do want to add just real quick, we do work very close with the Postal Department as well. And I will tell you that they go out of their way to make sure that those absentee ballots are delivered. They actually have special units within not only our state and local postal service, but also nationally. We just met with some of the national representatives here a couple of weeks ago, and they will make special trips to locations to verify that all absentee ballots have been removed from the bins and have been sent to the election boards. So they work very, very hard to go the extra mile to recognize those absentee ballots and to make sure they're delivered.
Awesome. So I think I captured all of the questions in the chat. So if anybody else has, we've got a few more minutes. So if you have any other lingering questions or I somehow missed your question as the chat was kind of filling up with stuff, go ahead and drop that back in the chat box. But just to kind of stay on the topic of absentee ballots, I know that there's a lot of concern around how quickly the election boards need to receive absentee ballots. And I know that, we specifically for the November election, we can request that ballot up to a week ahead and, getting that back and postal service lags and things like that. What is your recommendation for putting that in the mail to get it physically to the election board?
My recommendation, first of all, is number one, request your absentee ballot as soon as possible. Like I said, you can request those absentee ballots at the beginning of January for the November election. So request those as soon as possible. We do have The law does allow us to send them out. You can request your absentee ballot up until the Tuesday before the election. You have the Tuesday before the election at 5 p.m. to request that ballot. But you do need to keep in mind, where is that ballot going to? Or is it coming from Oklahoma City and being mailed to you in Norman? Or is it coming from Oklahoma City and being mailed to you in Bartlesville? Are you going to be out of state and you're having it mailed out of state? That's something to keep in mind as the voter. You do need to be aware, there are just certain, physical restraints that we do have. So keep that in mind. Request that ballot as soon as possible. I can tell you that most ballots are sent about a month out. It is going to vary from county to county, but most are sent a month prior to the election. Once that initial mailing is sent out, those absentee ballots are processed daily. So they are processing those as soon as they receive them. But again, you have to keep in mind, you've got to have that ballot received by you, you've got to have time to vote it, and you've got to have time to mail it. So allow yourself plenty of time to do that. And again, request as early as possible. And like I said before, if you receive that ballot and you decide at the last minute that you really would just like to, you just want to experience going to the polls and voting in person, you can absolutely do that. You can vote during early voting hours, or you can vote on election day. You just simply need to show up and sign that affidavit, and they will issue you a new ballot.
Yeah, so I did see something in the chat about someone saying that when they physically went to the polls, they had requested an absentee ballot, but then went and a poll worker had asked them for their absentee ballot. Is that, do you need to bring your absentee ballot to give it back, or you just have to sign
you just sign the affidavit, right? You would just need to sign the affidavit. Now there is a provision, let's say, some people like to just vote at home because they just, it just gives them time to kind of go over each of the candidates and the issues and read through everything, and that's absolutely fine. If you want to request that absentee ballot for that reason, so you can sit at home and vote it, in privacy at your home, you can certainly do that and hand deliver that to, sorry, my light's going out, there's no one at the office. So you can certainly, I'll go ahead and finish. You can certainly do that. You can hand deliver your absentee ballot to your county election board anytime before the day of the election. You do need to have it there by the end of the business day before the election, so you can do that. But you don't need to if you go to vote early or in person on election day. You don't need to do that.
Okay, and I don't know, we had talked about this on the phone, but I don't know if you talked about this in your presentation, about encouraging people to become precinct workers and poll workers for the upcoming elections.
Yes, absolutely. We would love to have poll workers, and especially this year, but every year, if you have a day that you could spend, it's a great learning experience. It's a great way to really kind of get behind the scenes and see how things work. And if you are interested in being a poll worker, please contact your county election board directly. They are the ones who organize those poll workers and who make those decisions. But also keep in mind that besides being a poll worker, our county election boards have lots of other volunteer opportunities prior to election day and on election day that you might also be interested in, that maybe aren't as time consuming as sitting there at that polling location all day. So if you have just a few hours that you would like to spend helping out, please call your county election board. They would absolutely love to hear from you.
Awesome. So I don't think that there are really any other questions so far in the chat, but I know that, did you want to answer? Did you see something?
Oh, yes, I did actually see, someone asked if we were currently under a state of emergency. So yes, we are, and we are, so for the August 25th runoff primary, we are under that state of emergency, and so you do have that option of returning a copy of your photo ID in lieu of that notarized ballot. For the November election, we just simply don't know that yet. Once we get 45 days out from that election, we will post that information on our website. If you do request an absentee ballot, you will know that because we will include those instructions there as well as on our website. And we will post it on Twitter and Facebook as well.
Awesome. I think that I speak for everyone when I say that this was super informative, really great to hear it directly from, the state election board, and from the mouth of the people that are conducting elections. And so, being able to clarify some of those nuances and some of the misinformation that we see out there on social media regarding
Yes.
how elections are being conducted, under the pandemic, but then also just kind of in general. So I won't speak for you, but I think that everybody should try to make relationships with their county and the state election board, so that you always have someone to kind of call. I know that I pick up the phone and call the Cleveland County Election Board, which is where OU is located, all of the time with questions. And it's really the best way to get your answer or your question answered quickly and correctly. So thank you so much, Misha.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Sorry about the lights.
It's okay.
I realized that as I was sitting here, I'm the only one in the office today, so the lights automatically go off if somebody's not walking around.
Totally understand. Well, thank you again so much.
You're welcome.
And we're happy to can have this kind of be one of our first stops so that we can inform the rest of our day. So thank you.
Okay, wonderful.